If you're looking to apply to University of Cambridge to study architecture and urban design as a master's student, you probably saw that they require you to submit a writing sample. So back when I applied, I actually just submitted an essay I wrote for my history and theory module. Together with a lot of other documents and the interview, etc, I was accepted onto the program. So in this video, I'm literally just gonna read out loud, word for word, what I wrote in this essay. So I hope you like the sound of my voice, because if you're gonna continue watching this video, you'll be listening to it for the next 10 minutes. Let's dig in. Beijing, a lost city, exploring the conflict between preservation of its urban heritage and modernization to improve citizens' quality of life. Super interesting topic. At least it was to me back when I wrote it. Beijing is undergoing a transformation at an unprecedented rate. In order to modernize its image under pressure of the 2008 Olympics and with an ever-increasing residential population in need of housing, large areas of traditional architecture which makes up the fabric of the city is being eroded to be replaced by skyscrapers and concrete roads. Some argue this has improved the quality of life for many citizens. The ever-escalating skyline, a representation of the rise in standard of living for its people. Could it be that other qualities which contribute to one's general well-being, such as happiness and social belonging, are being sacrificed as a result? This essay aims to investigate the merits of preserving traditional architecture with a focus on hutongs and siheyuans within the city, as opposed to its demolition for modern development. It has been argued that the conditions of these old structures are not suitable for modern man, yet people continue to inhabit these spaces with a sense of community and belonging, which newly built replacements fails to achieve. I became particularly interested in this topic after living in Beijing during a work placement and experiencing firsthand the transformation taking place in the city. Construction sites at every corner, cranes lining the skyline, the only constant is change. As an architecture student with a deep interest in vernacular Chinese architecture, exploring historic sites at every opportunity, I often ended up disappointed and felt like I was chasing after a piece of urban heritage that was rapidly disappearing. My essay is structured in 3 parts. The first being a general background history of Beijing and its hutongs, an attempt to understand its origin. The second part investigates the current conditions of hutongs and the lives of its residents, and the special qualities that can only be found in the old lanes. Thirdly, I will be looking at Tianmen, a recently completed development scheme in the center of Beijing where the old hutongs have been demolished, and in its place, a replica has been built to serve as shops and cafes for tourists to experience Beijing as the city it used to be. Beijing, a glorious past and faceless future. Beijing has been China's capital city since the 13th century, with a rich history dating back thousands of years. The city's layout is dictated by 3 major principles: the grid, the circle, and the axes. The city is laid out on a regular grid, with the Forbidden City dominating the center, and the rest of the city expanding in concentric quadrangles around the imperial domain. A building's importance is dictated by proximity to the center. A north to south axis runs through the city, starting from the Gate of Eternal Stability through Tiananmen Square and the Forbidden City to the Drum and Bell Tower in the north. Old Beijing did not expand further than its city walls, which were torn down in the 1960s under Chairman Mao's Cultural Revolution, but their path can still be traced by its modern replacement, the Second Ring Road. The modern city has now expanded up to the 6th ring, stretching many times beyond its former perimeter. However, its underlying principle of concentric quadrangles remains a consistent feature, as siheyuan, which is the same thing as a courtyard house, was the basic limit of Beijing, and rows of these are packed neatly in a grid of streets known as hutong. The historic grid pattern of these hutongs, most of which date back to mid-17th century, is a crucial element of one of the oldest centrally planned cities and examples of ancient Chinese city planning. The hutongs can be found only in Beijing surrounding the Forbidden City. In the 1940s, there were estimated to be 4,000 of these. The word hutong is thought to have originated from a Mongolian word, hotok, meaning water well, which transformed to hutong after being introduced to Beijing. In the Yuan dynasty, a major street was 37 meters wide. An 80-meter wide one was classified as a minor street. Anything smaller than 9 meters was a hutong. The hutongs normally contain a well-integrated mixture of houses, shops, and public buildings. Since the main buildings and all courtyard houses are oriented towards the south for better lighting, majority of hutongs runs along the east to west axis. The hutong are created by groupings of traditional bungalow buildings organized around one or more private courtyards, known as siheyuan. The buildings are usually constructed out of timber, painted bright red, contrasting blue-gray bricks walls, and tiled roofs. The decor and color, along with its height, was limited in imperial times and graded according to the status of its owner. A standard siheyuan is made up of houses on 4 sides of a courtyard, with the house on the northern side being the main house, the one opposite at the south called South House, and the adjacent adjacent ones called side house. The most private and important rooms are at the north end. Normally, the compound would be home to an entire family of 3 or 4 generations, with the elderly in the main building, the younger generation in the side houses, and the side house, the communal sitting room. 四合院 are carefully designed in accordance with Beijing's climate. The main buildings block the northern winds and allowing light to enter the compound from the south. They are intended to provide peace and solitude away from the hustle and bustle of the city. Originally constructed as single-family residences, after 1949, they gradually became homes for anywhere up to 30 families. In these overcrowded conditions, living conditions can be poor, and this sped up the desire amongst government officials to modernize and develop the neighborhood. Modernization equals demolition? I'm really trying to make me reading a piece of writing out loud more interesting by adding a lot of inflection to my pronunciation, let's say. Is it working? Can Beijing, a city with a population of over 20 million, afford to have hutongs in its city center? Surely the decaying 四合院 with their lack of basic facilities and comfort aren't worth saving? Wouldn't the quality of life of the residents be much better if they relocated to a modern apartment to improve the living condition of Beijing's hutong residents? Do we need to demolish their homes? To improve the living condition of Beijing's hutong residents, do we need to demolish their homes? Xu Zhenghua, a redundant factory worker, said the Prince's Foundation faced difficult questions in their bid to improve the area. I wonder how they can preserve the old buildings and still make them decent to live in. I think the best way to do it would be to move some of it out. If I received enough compensation for a 3-bedroom apartment inside the 3rd Ring Road, I would be more than happy to move. In order to answer that question, we must understand the conditions of these hutongs and what living in these neighborhoods are like. In early 2002, experts from the Tibet Heritage Fund teamed up with Tsinghua University's School of Architecture and local city management department to conduct a 2-year study, including a social survey on over 80 families residing in hutong neighborhoods. Results from the survey found that in traditional courtyard houses, the amount of living space per person is much below the official national average of 20.2 square meters. After the collapse of Qing Dynasty, design rules controlling size and decoration of rooms in accordance to the hierarchy of an imperial society became irrelevant, and along with the need to house thousands of citizens made homeless due to the Tangshan earthquake in 1976, 四合院 were divided to house several families. This prompted the haphazard addition of extensions to the compounds, normally constructed out of low-quality material, and sometimes the original structures of the building were altered to accommodate the changes. These badly constructed extensions block sunlight and occupy large areas of space in the courtyard, contributing towards the unappealing slum-like image of hutong. In all the hutongs, there is basic infrastructure and facility. There's at least one water tap in each courtyard, though it may be shared by several families with a common water tap. Residents have to use public shower facilities at an additional cost, although some have managed to install a basic system of solar showers that can be used only in the summer. This system is not available to everyone due to the space it requires and limited drainage facilities in the courtyard houses. Data from the survey indicates that 90% of residents use public toilets located on nearby streets. Very few courtyard homes have their own private toilets. Despite all these drawbacks, the survey asked the residents how satisfied they are with their homes, and most responded positive. Only 26 were unhappy with its condition. To date, Beijing has over 20 million people with a permanent population of around 14 million. Out of those surveyed in the Yandai and Golong hutong neighborhoods, 70% of residents are original Beijing residents and 55% from Chaodong area. The majority of them, 60%, have lived in their homes for over 30 years, many with their children living under the same roof or close by, which shows the residents have formed a deep-rooted community. Ever since the Cultural Revolution in the 1960s, it has been rare to find any family in urban China still living in their ancestral home. Thus, any residential community 30 years or more is a healthy development, one to be encouraged and protected, not subjected to turmoil and uprooted. To preserve the community is just as important as the preservation of historic architecture. After all, what is the primary purpose of a building other than to serve the people it houses? Residents of these courtyard houses consider themselves to be true Beijingers, speaking their own dialect with special greetings and expressions very distinct from Mandarin, the official language of China. In the courtyards, there's a general amiable relationship. Despite the overcrowded and rundown condition of hutongs, there's an atmosphere of intimacy and community, where everyone is familiar with each other and is comfortable with the environment. Residents in the survey surveyed generally were pleased with the physical environment, the main perks being its central location, easy transportation system, convenience of shopping, the neighborhood being pleasant, safe, peaceful, and lastly and most importantly, the establishment of a close-knit community. Many consider the Hutong lanes to be an important aspect in their social life. It's the piazza of the East, a place of gathering and space for activities to take place. The Hutongs also provide an area for local commerce. Many small shops and vegetable stores set up their businesses on such places, conveniently providing local residents with their basic necessities. As a result, most residents don't need to venture out of the Hutongs, as everything is within walking distance. Surely, this is a better urban design than the modern version, which is reliant on cars, where everything is a car ride away. This survey has shown that the courtyard houses are perfectly acceptable environments for living, with no need for demolition. Architecture without soul. Designers at the Prince's Foundation for Architecture and Urbanism are working with Chinese businessmen and academics at Beijing's Tsinghua University to save what remains of Dashi land. Large areas of neighboring hutongs have already been demolished and rebuilt as a major shopping and leisure project that has been criticized as an attempt to Disneyfy the old city. Due to the rapid disappearance of hutongs, government has listed selected hutong districts under protection, though the exact definition remains ambiguous. Families are forced to relocate out of lanes they lived on for generations into apartment buildings with modern amenities. It has been argued it is for the better as the flats are better equipped for modern life. The residents disagree, suggesting that traditional sense of community and street life found in the hutong lanes cannot be replaced. In the years leading up to the Beijing Olympics in August, the destruction took on a manic pace, and many more neighborhoods like the colorful Tiananmen district just south of Tiananmen Square are scheduled for renewal. A fine example of this would be the Tiananmen area, which demonstrates the benefits and drawbacks on these development projects. Tiananmen, which means front gate, is located just south of Tiananmen Square. It used to be a busy hub of alleyways and lanes selling everything from Chinese medicine to silk. It was the birthplace of Beijing opera, acrobatics, and countless culinary delight. It was dirty, chaotic, but ever so vibrant and full of life. Due to its prime location and commercial importance, the government decided to renovate it in order to improve its real estate value and to better preserve its historical and cultural relics. However, the success of this scheme is highly debatable. Rather than preserving what was already there and reusing materials from demolished buildings, the practice of completely bulldozing and rebuilding remains the typical Chinese method of redevelopment. After the renovation, international retail brands such as Zara and New Balance replaced clothing tailors run by old ladies with sewing machines. Haagen-Dazs and Starbucks now line the streets instead of food vendors and vegetable stores. The streets are certainly cleaner and more upmarket, the bricks shinier and the paint brighter, but its original character has been swept away. The life of the streets has been serialized down to a tourist attraction with sky-high rent and no cultural authenticity. Ironically, even tourists are unimpressed by this development. Lee said her travel agency doesn't recommend shopping at Tiananmen. Customers would complain if we spent much more time at the spot, saying they do not pay to see a bunch of shops. And it has negatively impacted the community that used to reside in its neighborhoods. Many local businesses were forced to shut down to make way for branded shops, and the option of reopening is deemed unrealistic because of the now unaffordable rent. Thousands of residents in this area were relocated to high-level apartments outside the third ring of the city, a far cry from the convenience living in hutongs used to offer. And of course, established communities were broken up. The relationship between neighbors is different. People used to help each other. Now they live behind closed doors. Don't we all? It is without a doubt that the modern amenities compensated to the original residents are great. However, it has come at a cost which many deem unworthy. The forced relocation to a less convenient location, loss of contact with friends and family, dispersion of long-established communities, these cannot be compensated materialistically. The greatest loss is the destruction of the original bricks and mortar which gave the architecture character, now broken apart and vanished forever. Conclusion. As Beijing attempts to shake off its old image and reinvent itself as an international destination and improve the lives of its people, large areas of historical land have been swept away. From the information collected in my research, it would appear that demolition and redevelopment is not beneficial to its people. Certainly, it has its positive merits such as alleviating pressure from public services and providing valuable land for the erection of tall skyscrapers, but to sacrifice long cultural history and architectural identity in the process, it seems like too high a price to pay. The hutongs are an essential part of Beijing's city fabric. It reveals much about the culture of its and the theory behind its construction, which is still studied to this day. The hutongs are of immense value to the community which it houses. It provides locals with an identity as a true Beijinger, brings pride and a link to their ancestral birthplace and establishes communities and neighborly relationships. When the residents are relocated to a newer home, their standards of living generally do improve, but that is not to be confused with quality of life, which is not based solely on materialistic wealth, but also on one's general well-being, influenced by one's social standing and the support and love gained from being part of a close-knit community. Chinese believe that in a 四合院, you can feel the spirit of the earth. Unlike in a high-rise apartment, you step on it every day. Currently, architects and urban planners are asked to create more environmentally friendly cities for future generation. It is rather strange that these old neighborhoods, which represent a perfectly logical and sustainable design and are bicycle-friendly, are being destroyed. At this crucial moment in time, when the architecture has not yet been completely lost, we must try to protect it in order to continue its legacy. Demolition is not the way forward. It's better to preserve and work with the existing legacy. The end. If you want to check out an example of other documents you have to submit to apply to Cambridge, make sure to click on these videos here and subscribe to my channel. See you again very soon.